The second week of Red Sox Spring Training is officially done. Let's go over everything. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. That's right, the Red Sox have officially played 2 weeks of spring training baseball. That's really impressive. Just simply how fast the time is flying right now. And in this video, we're going over everything that really stood out over this last week and how it could impact the 2025 Sox. So we're going to start with something very small. The Red Sox yesterday did make a signing. It was a right-handed pitcher by the name of Nick Burdi to a minor league deal. Now, this doesn't come with a non-roster invite, at least not yet, so it's strictly a minor league deal. And the reason I'm bringing this up, though, is because he does have some major league experience, and last year, it was actually really successful big league experience. In 12 games, he had a 1.86 ERA out of the bullpen. He missed a ton of bats with an 11.2 strikeout per nine, but he did also miss the zone a lot with an 8.4 walks per nine. That is basically a walk an inning. There were a lot of times where this dude was walking people throughout his career and really throughout his season last year. It led to an extremely high whip, and in the past, it's led to an extremely high ERA, but it was successful last season. This is kind of just strictly a minor league depth signing, right? There's no invitation to the big league roster, which means he is going to start the year in AAA, and that's kind of where he's been throughout his career. There's a ton of potential here with Burdi. The problem has been is just simply he hasn't been able to either reach that potential or he's been injured. He's dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career. Just sort of someone that I wanted to mention because he is coming into the Red Sox pitching lab now that they have a pitching lab. So I'm curious what they're going to end up doing with him and whether or not this is someone they could pull something out of. Maybe a name to pay attention to in the Worcester bullpen this season, but certainly no one that's going to at least immediately impact the Boston Red Sox. So I did want to mention it here, but I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it. Now let's get to the things that are affecting this big league team. And I think the biggest news, in my opinion, to come out of this week in Red Sox Spring Training is that Brayan Bello is officially on track to be with this team come opening day. If you remember, earlier, there was a bit of questioning as to whether or not he'd even be ready. Alex Cora had him go through, really the medical staff and Alex Cora, just the Red Sox in general, had him go through a strength test to figure out if this was even a possibility, that he could even potentially fight to get onto this opening day roster. Not that his spot was in jeopardy, just simply health-wise. The strength test went really well, and yesterday, Brayan Bello threw his very first bullpen of the 2025 season. It was 30 pitches. He said it was about 75% effort. Fantastic sign, right? Brayan Bello being in this rotation is going to be pretty important to the Red Sox success. He's still an important part of this team. So for him to get healthy, for him to get the okay, and for him to start regular baseball activities and be in line to be with this Red Sox team on this roster come opening day is a success in my eyes. We did also get our annual, hey, here's Pedro working with Bello video that we get every single year that gets fans super psyched. It also gets me psyched as well. So we did get that video. I love getting this video every single year, right? Last year it was in the DR. This year it's in spring training. But hey, we got Pedro in camp working with Bello. Never a bad thing to have Pedro Martinez work with Brayan Bello. But moral of the story here is Brayan Bello, really positive injury news update. Throwing at 75% is fantastic. Obviously, the next steps are going to be ramping up a little bit. He'll throw a bullpen where he goes maybe 80, 85%, then maybe 100%, and then he'll get into games. So we'll probably see Bello getting some in-game action, if not next week, the week after that, and then obviously prepping for the regular season. And sort of speaking of these legends in Red Sox camp, one of the things that stood out to me this week is that the Red Sox are really leaning into having these guys around this team. Not only did we talk about Pedro with Bello, but Pedro's also been working with the rest of this Red Sox rotation and with the Red Sox pitchers in general. Again, always a good thing to have a mind like Pedro Martinez talking to these guys, especially some of these younger guys. But even outside of him, you've got Dwight Evans working with outfielders. Specifically, we've seen him a lot around Roman Anthony, and he is absolutely raved about this guy. I love the idea of having a guy like Dwight Evans who kind of came up in a similar situation to Roman Anthony be with Roman Anthony, right? This guy is a Red Sox legend, a should-be Hall of Famer, and he was homegrown. He came up with a trio of really, really impressive Red Sox prospects, and they sort of made their own way in Major League Baseball. A fantastic guy to run some ideas off of with Anthony. Jim Rice, part of that equation as well. He's also in here with this camp, talking with guys. And of course, Big Papi David Ortiz, he even suited up. I love the idea of David Ortiz just like walking into a clubhouse in spring training, 10 years removed from being in baseball, and being like, hey, where's my jersey? I don't know. It just kind of made me laugh. But one big thing that a lot of people are kind of focusing on with David Ortiz is that he's spending some quality time with Rafael Devers. And gee, I wonder what they're talking about, right? I have a little inclination it has something to do with hitting absolute piss missiles and focus on nuking baseballs at the plate and strictly focusing on that, but who knows? They probably have a pretty good relationship with Rafi being in this organization for so long. I would assume they're talking about other stuff as well, but really good to see these legends sort of intermingling with this team, and it feels like this year in particular, I know we've seen this over the past, and it's not really something new. Alex Cora loves to bring these guys, but it feels like they're more intertwined with what the Red Sox are doing this year. It feels like we're seeing them more often with these guys than we've seen in the past. I know there was that article a couple of years ago, I think, where David Ortiz called out the organization for sort of their lack of really including some of these legends in the things that they're doing. So to see them more integrated this year is kind of, in my opinion, separating this team from years past, and that's a very, very good thing if you consider how the last couple of years have gone for the Red Sox. One thing I can't wait for is Dustin Pedroia making his spring training debut, right? He's there every single year. The pictures of him working with Bregman, Story, Grissom, Campbell, Hamilton are going to be absolutely fantastic. I love when Pedroia shows up every year. And man, my transitions are on point this video because that leads me directly into what we're talking about next. Because when we're talking about on-field play so far for the Red Sox, one of the things that's really stood out, not only amongst fans, but this organization in general, is when we're talking about that group of players who could potentially be second baseman. I guess I threw Story into there. He can't play second base, but I don't think he's fighting for a second base spot right now. I'm more so talking about that whole Bregman, Hamilton, Grissom, Campbell group, with Bregman sort of being, okay, he's going to play, right? We just don't know where he's playing. One guy who's kind of stood out above the rest, at least very early on this spring training, has been David Hamilton. Now, this is an extremely small sample size, so keep that in mind when I go over this, but Grissom so far, in 3 games he's played, a lot of contact, not a lot of results, 2 strikeouts, no hits. Campbell struggling as well in his 4 games, 7 strikeouts, no hits. That one a little bit more concerning, but again, a very, very small sample size. Hamilton, however, is hitting .250 with a .400 on base percentage, a double and a home run in 5 games. Right now, I think he's the name that's really turning heads. He's the guy who's sitting there and everyone's like, wow, I did not expect David Hamilton to come out and play like this early on this spring. And it's not only at the plate where he's showing, hey, this is really interesting stuff. It's also defensively as well. He's made some really great plays on the field early on this spring. Now, again, I have to say, an extremely small sample size, right? We're talking about a series with these guys during the regular season. Certainly no assumptions can be made about how this is going to wind up, and there's probably a pretty good chance that as we get through spring training, we're going to be saying this a couple of different times with a couple of different guys, right? Next week, it could be, man, Vaughn Grissom's really standing out, or wow, Christian Campbell really turned it around, and now he's the standout player at that second base position. But for right now, it's David Hamilton and David Hamilton's show only. And speaking of guys who have stood out, wow, another really solid transition on my part. Richard Fitts is a name that has really stood out this spring training as a guy who's done a whole lot to improve his arsenal. Yesterday was his second appearance this spring training, and he had 9 swing and misses on 36 pitches, which is excellent, right? One of the big things that a lot of us, and the Red Sox in particular, wanted to see from Richard Fitts was an ability to miss more bats. He was doing really well at limiting hard contact at the major league level last season, but even in AAA, he struggled to really miss bats on a consistent level. That's a whole lot of swing and miss against a Phillies team yesterday that had some legit stars in it. One other thing that really has stood out so far with Richard Fitts has been an uptick in velocity, specifically with his fastball. Yesterday, he topped out at 99 miles an hour. That is much higher than his max pitch velocity last season, and in particular with that fastball, he's up about 2.5 miles an hour in spring training over what he was doing last season. Again, another fantastic sign, and it's not just his fastball that's really seen an uptick. All of his pitches, his entire arsenal, have seen an uptick in velocity of at least a full mile an hour. Most of them sitting close to 2 miles an hour. And again, you talk about what did Richard Fitts need to do to really sort of propel himself into, hey, this guy could be a legitimate rotational threat conversation. That's exactly it, right? An increase in velocity paired with swing and miss on his off-speed pitches. Particularly, he's getting a ton of swing and miss right now on his slider sweeper combination. Those were literally the two things that we were like, hey, if Richard Fitts does this, he's going to be a really solid pitcher. Well, so far this spring, that's exactly what he's doing. Couldn't find a solid transition for this, so we're just going to go with the old red seat wipe. Wilyer Abreu is officially cleared to resume baseball activities again. Now, we haven't heard much about Wilyer Abreu this camp really at all. We've heard from Alex Cora that he had some tests done. He had some GI issues. We never really got any specifics as to what was going on with Wilyer, but as of yesterday, he was cleared to resume baseball activities. Unfortunately, though, there is some, I guess, a little bit of bad news here with Wilyer. Obviously, it's good news whenever someone gets healthy and is ready to get back onto this team, but he's a little bit behind. According to Alex Spear, who put out an article a couple of days ago, he's missed about 3 weeks of baseball activity, specifically strength and conditioning. Apparently, he just simply doesn't look like the same guy who looked like last year, right? He's lost a little bit of weight. He's lost a little bit of muscle mass because of the issues he was dealing with his body. So he's a little bit behind right now. And that leads to the question of whether or not he's going to be ready for opening day, right? We still have a pretty long ways to go before we even have a true conversation about whether or not he'll be on this roster, but being that far behind 2 weeks into camp really isn't a fantastic sign, especially because he's just starting to resume baseball activities, right? That's probably not going to mean, hey, he's going to be playing right field for the Sox next week. It's more so meaning, hey, we're going to start you back on your strength and conditioning stuff. We're going to start getting you into drills. We're going to start getting you into the cage just a little bit, maybe 50% effort this week, just simply to get your body back into let's play baseball type shape, right? Nothing crazy here. So there is a real chance that Wilyer Abreu ends up on the IL to begin the season with the Boston Red Sox. Then it becomes who's going to take that roster spot. Does this kind of blow the door wide open for Roman Anthony to break camp for the team, or Christian Campbell in left field with the Red Sox? Could one of those guys be the fill-in here for Wilyer Abreu if he starts on the IL? Or is it going to be Wilyer's going to need 10, 15 days? We don't want to bring up a guy like Anthony or Campbell to fill in for 10, 15 days. Let's bring up a guy like Nate Eaton, who's looked solid defensively for the Sox so far this spring, or Trace Thompson. You know, he has some power in there. There's a lot of swing and miss, but he's also looked solid on the field as well. It's just sort of a fill-in for the Sox until they can get Wilyer back. Very interesting conversation that could be coming up here with Wilyer Abreu, but overall, very, very good to know that he is healthy and ready to go and finally getting back to regular baseball form. Outside of that, I think one of the things a lot of people have been mentioning is that the Red Sox bullpen in particular, but the Red Sox pitching staff in general, has seen a whole lot of walks this spring. Breathe, guys. It's okay. A lot of these guys right now aren't entirely focusing on pounding the zone with strikes. Right now, they're focusing on honing in on pitch shapes, honing in on stuff they worked on the offseason and how it's translating to major league games. Guys are coming in here to tinker with stuff. An example of this, Zach Kelly came into this spring training working on a two-seamer that he threw a lot of in the game that he's got into so far, right? These guys aren't truly focusing on just strictly getting dudes out. They're focusing on ensuring that the stuff that they worked on in the offseason is translating well enough to potentially be a part of what they do in 2025. These guys are going to settle down. This is really the first week of full games that we've gotten with the Red Sox in spring training. Garrett Crochet is going to have games where he walks a lot of people, but it's not going to be a normal thing with Garrett Crochet because they're going to start honing in on this stuff and really start to try and get people out as we get further along into this spring. So yes, there's been a lot of walks from the Red Sox bullpen. Don't panic. Don't panic. This is spring training. This is exactly the time you want these guys to tinker with this stuff. You don't want them doing this come March 29th. I think overall, vibes are still really high with this Sox team. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of this Red Sox spring training so far. Guys are getting healthy. Guys are starting to perform like we want them to perform. We're starting to see some really good stuff come out of this camp. I'm still really excited about this season, and we're 2 weeks in. I think I'm only just getting more excited, but I want your opinion. What do you think about this sort of roundup of news from spring training? What stands out to you in spring training so far? And what do you think about this team? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you guys want to listen instead of watch these episodes, the best way to do that is to head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.